let me just start this by saying that I love the Shadowhunter world. Yes, I have some or a lot of issues with these books, but I genuinely really care for a lot of the characters in this series, and I mostly really enjoy reading them, but I have some things to say. And my thoughts on the infernal devices can be boiled down to this. James Carstairs deserved so much better than he got. My biggest issue is this. Starting in Clockwork Prince, Jem is turned into or reduced to an obstacle that simply exists to keep Tessa and Will from being together, therefore making their love story more tragic and smoldering. Just think about when Tessa gets engaged to Jem. She doesn't do it entirely because she wants to, but because Will isn't available, and it's one of those might as well things, except might as well in this case is might as well get married to someone who is dying. She even admits that she cares more for Will on page 431, where she's like, and if there was some small locked away part of herself that had not quite given up Will, surely she owed it to herself as much as to Jem to do whatever she could to destroy it. When in reality she does very little to destroy it. She kind of gives into it, but we'll get to that, don't worry. My absolute favorite of her not just thinking about Will, not just considering how much she cares about him, the scene in Clockwork Prince where, page 462, Will, she said in surprise, but he was pinning her to the wall with his body, his hands letting up her shoulders into a damp hair, his mouth sudden and hot on hers. She fell and spun and drowned in the kiss. His lips were soft and all of that. She's drowning in this kiss with her fiancé's best friend, and she doesn't think that that's, you know, any reason to be concerned. She's just kind of like, I mean, she does say no, I'll be fair. But she's enjoying this a little bit too much to still be like, oh, it's completely fine for me to go out and marry Jem still. The point is, she loves Will more than Jem, or at least too much to fully be with Jem. And I'm not saying that she should have turned him down, like, things were more complicated than that and I'm willing to admit it. But maybe saying no to Jem's engagement would have hurt him less in the long run, and going behind his back and hiding all of these feelings for Will from him. And once Tessa and Jem are engaged, this is when we really see that he is more of a device to be used rather than a character. I mean, if you really think about it, what do you know about Jem except for the fact that he's kind, and he likes music, and also he's ill? We really see very little of his personality or of his opinions, and especially towards the end of the series, he's almost too agreeable, to the point where it really doesn't make him seem like he's a fully fleshed out human being who actually has any sort of emotions. For example, page 245 in Clockwork Princess, where it says, Tessa, Jem said, she knows despair and hope as well. You can teach each other. Find her, Will, and tell her that I loved her always. My blessing for all that it is worth is on you both. He's literally on his deathbed, and what he's thinking about is, oh, you can go get with my fiance once I'm dead. It's fine. I don't care. He's just fine with that. Is anyone actually that perfect? He also says in Clockwork Princess, page 286, I'm glad, he said, they will be able to take care of each other when I'm gone, or at least I can hope for it. He says she does not love him, but surely she will come to love him in time. Will is easy to love, and he has given her his whole heart. But if there is one thing I could ask of you, it is that you be happy. I want you to have a family and grow old with those who love you. And if you wish to marry Tessa, then do not let the memory of me keep you apart. Who does that? Why? No. This is the one that really... Page 520. This is where they're talking about how Will and Tessa lost their virginity to each other, and Tessa is thinking this. She knew Jem had known or guessed and forgave them both. That's all we get. Jem knows his best friend, his platonic husband, slept with his future wife not even like an hour after they thought he was dead, and he's just like, I'll forgive him, go get married, I don't care. He doesn't get to be angry, we don't get to explore his feelings at all, and yes, I understand that he's a silent brother now, but we never see anything even before that. He's on his deathbed and he's thinking about Will and his future life with Tessa, and he's not even a little bit bitter about that. And I think, yes, he is very kind, he's very understanding, he's great, but he's also a human being, and I feel that we should be able to see some emotion in him every once in a while that is beyond, oh, I'm forgiving and I love Will and Tessa. And it's not just that we never focus on his feelings, it's also that we never focus on his life in the same way that we focus on Will. Will is the character that undergoes the most change in this series. His curse brings with it his own plotline, this little adventure he goes on, we get to meet his sister, we go to Wales with him, and this trip to save Tessa, we explore his emotions in great depth, and he has this relationship with Magnus that we get to read about. We explore Will as a character outside of his relationship with Tessa and Jem, which we never do with Jem. We never really learn a lot about his past, we don't meet his parents like we do with Will. We just never really see him as a person, we see him as someone who is loved by Will and Tessa. Also, in no way am I saying here that Will should have ended up with Tessa. She did not deserve Will Herondale either. It starts with her two-timing both of them. She goes and makes out with Will, and then she's kissing Jem. And yes, they're not exclusive, it's technically fine for her to be doing that, but I just think they'd feel a bit weird if they knew. Imagine if this happened to a friend of yours, it would just be really uncomfortable, but everybody just kind of accepts that this is the way it is. But back to Jem. Like I said, we never focus on him in the same way that we focus on Will. Him and Tessa end up having this secret relationship because of Jem that brings them closer, and is essentially just emotional cheating. So this is page 199 in Clockwork Princess. This is during one of Will and Tessa's many, many secret conversations about their feelings, about Jem, about his illness, about anything really. And it essentially leads to Tessa almost telling Will that she loves him. It says, what had she almost done? What had she nearly told Will? And yet I love you. But she does because Charlotte interrupts them. So she's engaged to another man, but she is about to tell Will that she loves him. What about this situation makes you think, yeah, I should get married, this is fine? The fact that, yes, they can't be together, but they still both care for Jem is just something that brings them closer in the end, which is something we can see on page 56, also in Clockwork Princess, after Jem collapses. Will's eyes met Tessa's as she came closer, almost tripping again over her torn gown. For a moment they were in perfect understanding. Jem was what they could still look each other straight in the eye about. So now that they share this secret love for each other that they have to hide from Jem, it only makes their love story more tragic, and it puts them on this pedestal because of everything that they are sacrificing and what they're going through to keep Jem happy. Basically, Tessa treats Jem like garbage, and she completely disregards his feelings and hides things from him. But that isn't what bothers me most about her. Neither is the fact that she's extremely overpowered, that her eyes are beautiful and change color, and that she is gorgeous and has no idea, and that she can go into battle with barely any training but come out completely unscathed. It's that she is able to destroy Will and Jem's friendship. And yes, obviously it's not completely her fault. Jem and Will should be held responsible for the fact that their relationship essentially breaks down, but the catalyst is really just Tessa and the fact that they are both in love with her. For example, page 172 in Clockwork Princess. Will looked down at Jem, and what he felt more than jealousy, more than anything else, was a wistful desire to commiserate with his best friend, to speak of the feelings he held in his heart about Tessa. Or page 241, also in Clockwork Princess. This, Will said, is the one thing you cannot give me comfort for. Jem shook his head, but how could I not have noticed? This is where Jem realizes that Will is also in love with Tessa. This love for Tessa that they both share is the one thing that Jem is not able to help Will with, because he's engaged to her and he was engaged to her first and all of that. It's the only thing I believe that could have torn their friendship apart, and as soon as Tessa enters the Institute, or as soon as they're both in love with her, it seems like there's no cute, casual, funny exchanges anymore. It's all very serious, and it just really focuses more on the things they're hiding from each other than how much they truly love each other. And I'm so bitter about that, because the Parabatai bond is my absolute favorite thing about not just the Mortal Instruments or this series, but about the Shadowhunter world in general. I love the idea of platonic marriage. That is the coolest thing in the entire world, especially because I feel like so many young adult series or young adult books or the media in general overlooks the importance of platonic love. We always are so obsessed with romance, and initially this peer-type bond seemed like the perfect way to draw attention to friendship as well. I thought finally we're not placing way too much value in romance and forgetting completely about friendship, but that is exactly what happens in this series as well. Tessa shows up and is able to destroy this beautiful platonic marriage between Jem and Will in the matter of a couple of months. And we're supposed to believe that Will and Jem, you know, they're platonically married, they're the most important people in each other's lives, but we hear Jem say over and over again that he's never been happier than he has been with Tessa. It just bothers me that this random girl that they're so obsessed with for reasons I genuinely do not understand is able to overshadow any bond that they've built up over the years. And we see this glorification of romance over and over again in this series because every single character is neatly paired up with someone else. No one gets a happily ever after that isn't a happily ever after with someone else. And I do feel the need to point out that yes, Jessamine's storyline was pretty cool when she realized that her shadow and her family was more important than Nate, who was only using her, but if she'd lived, she still would have just neatly been paired up with someone who did really love her. It doesn't really counteract the rest of the series to me. I wish the message could have been that the love of Will and Jem's life isn't Tessa, it's that they're the love of each other's lives, because platonic love matters. But instead of telling that story, the series focuses on this weird love triangle where it tries to justify Tessa treating these boys so badly and like they're interchangeable because Will and Jem are two parts of the same soul. And what she did wasn't wrong, she had to love both of them because they're... I don't even know. You know, the entire explanation it goes into at the end where it justifies this weird fantasy of having both of these boys completely adore you and not mind that you also were with his best friend. And that is just not something I'm able to take anything away from. That never applies to real life in any way. That is literally just something to use to play out this fantasy of this perfect love triangle where the girl gets to be with both of them, and it just fulfills the fantasy of, you know, the typical young adult reader, just teenage girls who are in love with Jem and Will. But this isn't just something that bothers me about the series, this is something that bothers me about media in general. It's this idea that friendship is always secondary to romance. But in this case, it's just especially frustrating because Will and Jem were best friends for 6 years. But then this random girl called Tessa comes along and all of that is just magically undone because obviously the person you're physically attracted to is so much more important than your best friend of 6 years. This is not good for my blood pressure.